So X-Men 97 is wrapped up. The finale came out today, and I think it's a true triumph, man. And I want to talk about why the show matters so much for Marvel. Marvel's got to be going like this, like, whoo! But also, I think Marvel's probably pretty excited about this show essentially kicking off what I'm calling the MCU comeback season. Yes! This subverted expectations, and not in the way that like Last Jedi and a lot of other things have been subverting expectations. I mean, I think many of us, I'll speak for myself, I was very trepidatious. I was very concerned. I was worried about this show. And so my expectations were kind of low, and I was really worried because Marvel has had a lot of misses over the last couple of years. That's just what it is. And the 90s X-Men show is so seminal to nerds. It is such an important project. And the concern would be if this was just your regularly scheduled Disney Plus crap, it was not going to be good enough, and it was going to do damage. You're better off not making X-Men 97 than making it and having it be lackluster, because I think you would have felt that. To my surprise, and I think to the surprise of many people, I had my expectations subverted in a very good way with the show, and I think a lot of us were caught off guard and surprised by it. I think the show is adult. That's one of the things that really shocked me, was how adult it is. And I mean, there's stuff and themes even in the finale, man, that I was like, bro, like there's just layers thematically to what's happening between these characters. Like when Cyclops, standing over dying Wolverine, says, "Don't you dare break her heart. Do what you do best and survive and heal," or whatever he said. The show is so well written, not just in plot, and I think the plot's off the chain. Like, it's truly crazy how the plot was built to this, but also just in the character moments themselves. I mean, it is truly inspiring character moments. The dialogue is really good. A lot of really fun one-liners, a lot of moments throughout the series where you're just like, damn, like that was pretty clever, right? I think one of the things that also surprised me about X-Men 97 was how it takes the ball and goes. It takes what the old show did well and enhances it, which is crazy because we would have probably just been happy if it just carried the same tone and the same thing forward, but it didn't do that. It did better. It goes further. The show benefits from standing on the shoulders of giants. You've got obviously a lot of X-Men writers. You've got the old original animated show. But as you know, Rob has pointed out in some of our conversations, even the 90s show did not have all of the X-Men stories that this show now has. You're talking about 20, maybe 22 years of shows, or rather of comic stories that the show now gets to kind of pick from. You also have the movies. You also have the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I felt this a lot in the finale specifically, that the popularity of the MCU actually raised the profile, and it gave more tools or toys for this X-Men 97 team to work with. Because seeing some of the cameos and the characters that we see in the finale, I think hits a little bit more because of the popularity of the MCU. Everybody knows who Black Panther is now. We have like seeing the Dora Milaje and seeing Black Panther and the Dora Milaje drawn similar to the MCU. It's like that connection is there. It exists even stronger than it had before, you know? So, you know, you got your Iron Man and you got your Captain America. I truly think back in the day when the 90s show was first popping off, bro, Shellhead and basically, you know, Rogers the Boy Scout, they don't really move the needle. Maybe Captain America a little bit more so, but like Iron Man wasn't really that popular back then. But now, because of RDJ and Tony Stark, we see Iron Man and we see Captain America chilling with the president, and it just has a little bit more right? So I think the show does this brilliant thing of using a lot of the success of Marvel in the time period from when the old show ended and this show began to its benefit. I think the show also proves that it's really about the characters. right? And specifically with this show, part of the reason that I think it resonates so much is because it's characters that we know well. The X-Men, the original group, and, you know, Jean and Cyclops and Logan and Gambit and Rogue, Magneto and Charles, that core group, which has been developed through media for a long, long time, there is an archetype for each one of these characters that you can appreciate even if you don't read all of the comics. You generally have an understanding of what Magneto is like. You generally have an understanding of what Charles is like. And so in this finale, a lot of the scenes between them, they hit really, really hard because you know these characters. And it feels cathartic to go through this struggle with them, knowing what you know about them, okay? And, you know, even a character like Sunspot, who's like a newer character, not, you know, technically new, but not OG, right? That character is developed alongside these other characters in the same way that like Jubilee and maybe Kitty Pryde had been developed in some other X-Men runs. And I think it just shows this really cool blueprint, which is to say, you still need the OGs and you need those iconic characters. You can develop other characters alongside them, but you need the big ones. I don't think this show works as well if it's a completely different team of unknown characters, because you don't have that same archetype. You can't attach or associate with those characters in the same way. And I'm really hoping that is a lesson that Marvel Studios learns, because I think Phase 4 kind of shows that when you remove a lot of, you know, big characters that are typical that you have known for years. I mean, there's a reason the X-Men are as big. There's a reason a lot of these characters like Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor are as big as they are. I think when you remove a lot of that stuff and you kind of try to develop outside of it, it just doesn't resonate the same way. So I think this show is sort of laying a blueprint for Marvel Studios as far as why you need some of these big iconic characters to do a lot of heavy lifting. And it's not heavy lifting in the sense of like, oh, that's cool that that character did that shit. No, I'm talking about the emotional beats, the character moments. Those work because we have an attachment and we understand what that character is. Who is this person? Now, other thing that's wild about this is, holy shit, what a great time to have a hit like this with X-Men. Because the reality of what Marvel has been going through in the past couple of years, I mean, they aren't even denying it anymore, right? You've got Feige talking about how they're the underdog again. You've got Sean Levy saying, look, you'd have to be living under a rock to know or to not know that Marvel hasn't been lighting it up the same way. You've got Luis D'Esposito saying, we got a little too comfortable. Maybe we're trying to do too much. And things just haven't worked out. And now we're back to trying to build it back up again. What I am calling comeback season. And to have a show like this come out, be as popular with the fans as it has been, is a huge boon to them. And on top of that, it's just brilliant programming, because we're going to go from 97 into Deadpool and Wolverine, yellow costume Wolverine, into a lot of X-Men. Oh, and by the way, the X-Men are about to come into the MCU, right? So we've been talking about this, but it is absolutely the case that Kevin Feige is developing the X-Men right now. And so it's got to feel pretty good to be sitting back and being like, okay, that is definitely working. Obviously resonating with fans. Deadpool and Wolverine seems to be popping off. People are very excited about that movie. So if I were Marvel, if I were Feige, I'd be feeling pretty good sitting back and saying like, wow, this stuff's working and we haven't even really pulled the trigger. We have all the, we can do X-Men now. And I think the age of the X-Men is going to literally save the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it just is popping, man. It's what is working. And it's also a property that can grow with the audience. There's a lot of discussion these days about, is Marvel not growing with its audience? You know, because a lot of us grew up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and yet now, you know, you see things like The Boys and Invincible and some of these more mature things that are becoming very popular. Is Marvel unable to grow with its audience? Well, X-Men presents an incredible opportunity, because X-Men, and it's so funny because it's like George Lucas says, it's like poetry. This happened in comics. X-Men became the thing in comics that was able to sort of rejuvenate Marvel's whole entire line. The X-Men hard carried Marvel. They were the whole thing that kind of saves Marvel Comics, and now they might be the thing that saves Marvel live action, right? And I think that with the X-Men just is the opportunity to do more mature stories. Not necessarily more gritty, violent, R-rated stuff, but I'm talking about like from the material perspective. This is stuff that is just more mature, allegorical social issues, but also just the idea of otherizing somebody, right? That is kind of caked into it. And so I think it's quite brilliant. And if I were Marvel, I'd be feeling so good. I'd be like thanking my lucky fucking stars that the 97 show popped off, that Deadpool Wolverine's popping off, and we have the X-Men to be able to launch out there for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe and really pivot things. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about as far as it not charting, okay? Because I've had people on Twitter asking me about this. I've had some of you guys asking me about this. What's the deal with X-Men 97 not charting on Nielsen? If it is this big hit, why is it not charting on Nielsen? Well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because first of all, that is undeniable. It did not chart at all in originals or overall on Nielsen. That's just true. But neither did Invincible. And from what I've heard, X-Men 97 actually pulled in more numbers than Invincible, which is interesting because I think the Invincible episodes are around an hour. Am I not right on that? And there were 8 of them, right? There are 10 episodes of X-Men 97, and they're around a half hour, right? So you're literally talking about 5 hours to 8 hours of content. So with a whole 3 extra hours, almost double the amount of minutes, Invincible actually performed worse than X-Men 97. So I think Marvel should take that as a good sign. I think X-Men broke records for its premiere. It did 4 million in 5 days, which is the biggest animated thing they've ever put on Disney Plus. And so I think there's a lot of positive takeaways. But the other thing that's interesting here is that narrative matters, right? And when you look at a show like Invincible, I think the narrative is that season 2 was a step back. I think the narrative on Invincible is they really screwed up. They took way too long. They did a weird in the mid-season break. That's another reason why it probably didn't chart on Nielsen. There's also the release time. There's a lot of stuff. Like the narrative on Invincible is negative. The narrative on X-Men 97 is incredibly positive. That narrative is huge. And I've seen crazy shit happening in the fandom where you had people like the Yellow Flash coming out on Twitter and publicly saying, I was wrong about Beau DeMayo. X-Men 97 is a masterpiece. It's one of the best things Marvel's ever done. By the way, Beau DeMayo said thank you to him. And the reason that's important, the reason that's really interesting is because you basically have a show that is so good, it is kind of hater-proof. It is making certain people that would make their bread and butter on hating Marvel be quiet or literally turn into a supporter of the show. That's fascinating, especially within the culture that we exist in right now. That's something Marvel should really take note of. Literally hater-proof. And the narrative around it is so fucking positive. And we've seen actual data that supports it trending. More than Bad Batch, more than Invincible, more than like any of these other shows. That show was trending. I remember after episode 5, there were like 5 or 6 things that were trending. Fucking Gambit was trending at like 100K tweets. It's crazy. So if I were Marvel, I wouldn't be too super concerned with the show not charting on Nielsen. I would feel very positive about the Twitter engagement, the social media engagement that happened with that show. And I think it kind of shows that there's a sort of bubble thing that happens in fandom, right? And my impression of what happened with X-Men 97 is this. X-Men 97 made the really hardcore nerd community very satisfied. Maybe it didn't branch out into the more normie, casual audience member thing. I think that's fair. Maybe because it's a cartoon, maybe because of the lengths of the episode, could be a variety of reasons. But I think you can't deny that the show popped off for the people that are very engaged in this stuff. And that's a W. I personally think it's possible that the next season does chart. There are a couple of different reasons why. Number one, you will include the rewatches into season 2, so it's going to get a little bit more of a boost. I sort of wonder if maybe they'll make the episodes a bit longer to try to help with charting. I also could see them maybe dropping it as a binge, even though that's a little bit less desirable for the discussion. That would help them chart. I've seen discussion of that where people were saying, okay, well, if these shows, like even Invincible, were to drop all at once, they have a much better chance of charting because the current metrics for that are like minutes watched over the first 5 days or in a window or something like that, right? So I'll be really interested to see how will it chart. Is it actually possible that it charts? The other thing that I'll show you real quick here is that it is actually performing super well. So we've got some data coming out, and maybe you've seen certain channels out there kind of going hater with their narrative. Like I've seen some people say like, oh, X-Men 97 is a flop because Echo got more views than it. So if you look at this here, it's kind of interesting. 2024 share of Disney Plus original series. It is, which also, what the hell? Percy Jackson? I had no idea Percy Jackson was kind of crushing it like this. This big chunk up here, that's Bluey. They call it other. They might as well just call it Bluey though. You have a bunch of different things over here, like literally Mando season 1 making up 2.6, season 3 3.3, Ahsoka. Like there's a lot of stuff that people are still watching within 2024, right? This is the one that's kind of throwing people though. You've got Echo getting like 12% of the total viewership here. And then you've got X-Men 97 over at like 7%. And the Bad Batch Season 3 is actually not too far behind them, which is kind of interesting. And so people are saying like this is crazy and they're calling it a flop because they think Echo performing better in 2024 means that this is a flop. When you really consider what's happening here, Echo was, how many episodes was it? Was it 5 episodes? And they're an hour or more. I think the first episode was like an hour and a half or something, right? So they're a lot longer. And I think when you consider just how people view content, most people are not super hardcore nerds like us. And the success of Marvel Studios, in the Infinity Saga was the fact that they had kind of broken out of the nerd bubble and they were in the mainstream. You don't become endgame level success without the mainstream. So you still have a lot of mainstream normies that will check out live action Marvel stuff. Maybe they're not going to stick with it, but they're at least going to give it a shot because they've had so many positive experiences. Despite Phase 4, they've had a lot of positive experiences with the Marvel content, right? So I kind of look at this and I think, man, that's really interesting because I actually, if I were Disney looking at this, I'd actually be pretty happy with Bad Batch and X-Men 97's numbers here. Now, the difference, of course, is that Bad Batch really didn't trend. It really didn't do much on social media, and X-Men 97 did. I have personally felt like there have been so many big videos in our bubble talking about X-Men 97. I don't feel that way about Bad Batch. So it sort of shows that there is this difference in what you would call success within the nerdy bubble and then within like mass appeal normie viewership numbers. And I also think X-Men 97 will only go up from here and has the potential to sort of break into charts in its next season. So overall, a massive success. X-Men 97 blew me away. And I think it blew a lot of people away. I think it will get a lot of viewership in the coming months as more and more people either discover it. If it wins an Emmy, that's going to, push more people to it. And this is a sign of good things to come. The MCU comeback season is upon us.